Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all and welcome to the channel. In this video we will discuss assertions in unit testing. But before we begin, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وارض اللهم عنا معهم أجمعين اللهم آمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. We begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful in this life and in the hereafter. We thank Him for all of His blessings that He has bestowed upon us, for they are innumerable. And we pray that we follow in the footsteps of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his fellow companions. Amen. We also ask for prayers and blessings to be bestowed upon Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers, as they were bestowed upon Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and his followers. To remind you of what we discussed previously in the testing phases lecture, unit testing, or testing in general with respect to programming, is the execution of the code to detect any errors that may have been committed, as well as identifying the source of that issue or that error to resolve it. For unit testing in particular, this form of testing is performed on units. Units, or the term unit, is used to indicate the scope of the testing. The test is performed on a small unit, or a small group, or on a small scope, or at a small level, however you wish to interpret it or label it. Thus, a unit is considered either class methods, so a test for a single method could be considered a unit test. Thus, a class method can be considered a unit. An entire class, so multiple methods within a single class, can be considered a unit, or modules. If you are testing the entire module, this could also be considered a unit. You may think of it as packages as well instead of modules. Either way, a unit refers to a small scale, not a large scale, as opposed to, for example, integration testing or end-to-end testing. Unfortunately, the Java API that is already pre-built or predefined within the JDK lacks the ability to test units for errors. That is why we need to resort to what is known as a framework. A framework is a collection of libraries, or you can think of it as a collection of modules, a collection of packages, and so on and so forth, written in a particular language that is meant to serve a purpose or create conveniences for a particular purpose. For example, if you wish to design websites and implement functionalities for that website, you can use JavaScript by itself, or you can use a framework designed from JavaScript. So frameworks always have a foundational language. They are not a new language. They are based upon or developed through a particular language. JavaScript has multiple frameworks such as React, Angular, and Vue. CSS has frameworks such as, what was it called? Tailwind, if I recall correctly, and Bootstrap. Java has frameworks such as JUnit, Spring and Spring Boot, also Jakarta EE. What else? .NET is a framework built upon C# or designed through C#. Though technically Angular is designed through TypeScript, but TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript, so people tend to refer to it as a JavaScript framework instead of TypeScript. But we can discuss such pedantic labels later on, bi'idhnillah, and God willing. Returning to our example, you can design a website using pure JavaScript, also known as vanilla JavaScript. That is the term used for this, achieving a particular purpose without any frameworks. But because of the limitations of JavaScript, or instead of saying limitations because JavaScript is quite flexible as a language, because of the inconveniences that arise as a result of designing a website through JavaScript, certain developers try to create conveniences for software developers, and these conveniences lead to easier development or a more streamlined process of development. These manifest in the form of frameworks. For example, Angular can design websites in a much easier and faster manner than with vanilla JavaScript. So that is basically the nature of a framework. For unit testing, we need a framework which will obviously be designed through Java as a programming language that is responsible for achieving unit testing. This framework, the principle is the same for other frameworks, but the one I am familiar with will be JUnit. That is the name of the framework, and it is easy to remember because it is basically Java unit testing. So JUnit framework. That is the framework we will be using for this demonstration. Sorry, I have to take this. I will be right back. Apologies for that. I have returned. Now, because this is a framework that is unavailable to the foundational API of Java, we need to obtain this framework externally. That means this framework has now become a dependency. We depend on it for this project or for this particular purpose. So this becomes a dependency now. Which tool did we cover previously that helps us download dependencies easily? That was Maven. If you are familiar with project managemental tools, you can use other tools such as Gradle, if you are more comfortable with that, to download the JUnit framework. So we will be using Maven for this tutorial because downloading this framework or this dependency without Maven will be rather tedious. To save you time and avoid any inconveniences, we will create a Maven project and download this through Maven. Here we have IntelliJ, and this is the project that we have been using since the beginning of this tutorial. For now, I will create a new project and create it using Maven. Yeah, I will have to use this, though I prefer to use the IntelliJ build system. We will use Maven because then we can use the POM XML file or POM file to download the dependencies. So for this project, we will call it testing for simplicity. We do not need to create Git, and it is Java, Maven, and our JDK. Create. And let us create this in a new window. Now, before we start downloading, we need to look at the arrangement of the directories or the folders. This arrangement is common. You will see it in professional settings, possibly academic settings, but that would depend on your institute, obviously. I do not think professors teach practical implementation of programming, unfortunately. But this is present at a professional setting. You will find the src folder or source. The get ignore is for Git. We can cover that later. Once you expand this, you will see main and test. Main is where the actual code resides. And as you can see, you will find Java and resources. Resources is the folder for different, well, resources, pun intended, that are used by the code. For example, images can be placed here. Audio files can be placed here. Video files that will be invoked through the code can be placed here, and so on and so forth. In addition to main, you will see a folder called test, and also it will have Java, as in this is where the code resides. This is where we will place our unit tests. So the code that we will write for unit tests lies in this folder that is within the test folder. That is the directory arrangement for unit tests. Now let us download the JUnit framework dependency so that we can gain access to the various classes and methods within that framework to achieve our purpose, which is basically designing a unit test. So if we click here, there was a way to search for dependencies through IntelliJ. I just do not remember. What do we need to do to search? Here, I believe. Yes. So if we click on dependencies here, we can search for the dependency we seek. I wish for JUnit, so I will type it here, and the search results will appear as follows. You will find different versions for the different JUnit framework. We are searching for version 5. Major, of course, not minor or patch. Why 5? Because that version has additional functionalities absent from the older versions of JUnit. So let us browse this and try to find version 5. I believe it was Jupyter. Yeah, this one. Let me type Jupyter. Yep, it was this one. Okay. So we will download this. How do we add? I have not used this before, unfortunately. Now, there is an error. As we spoke previously, we need to reload. And once it is reloaded, we will find that the dependency has been added for us, thankfully. Okay. Now let us actually design our unit test. To design a unit test, we need to have the original code, then test it in another form of code. So how can we do this? Firstly, we will head to main, then Java, then create code that we wish to test. So we do not need this driver class. Where is the delete? We do not need the driver class. Let us create a simple student class. Actually, no, not student. Let us create the M word, which is despised by the World Health Organization, and you can clearly see that in this day and age, that the rates of marriage are dropping, the rates of divorce are increasing, and people merely choose to fornicate instead of actually marrying. This was prophesied by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, 1400 years ago, that divorce rates will increase. And you can see why. People are deterred from marriage due to various reasons. All of them are controlled. They are not acts of God, as they say. They are all controlled and forced upon the people. We can analyze this later on, bi'idhnillah, God willing. Now, this is a class, so this can be considered a unit, but to show how you can actually write a unit test, let us create a method. From that method, we will start our assertions. Linguistically, assertions mean confirmations. So we will confirm the validity of that code by testing it. So here we can create, let us see, what can we create that we can test? Public string or char, but I will return string. Let us see. Marital age restriction. And here we can pass in int age1 and int age2 for the people who wish to marry. This method will compare these two ages, and if they meet the requirements of the World Health Organization, they can be wed. Of course, no age range or age group matches the requirements of the World Health Organization. They would prefer that you fornicate over actually marrying and bearing children. That is why they designed the Family Planning Organization by, I believe it was David Rockefeller, if I recall correctly. I could be mistaken. Family planning basically means abortion and any form of deterrent that prevents pregnancies. And here we can return null for now while I think about how we can design this method. Well, instead of string, perhaps we can return Boolean. And here we can return false for now. It is either yes or no. You can marry or you cannot marry. It is a binary choice. Though in this day and age it is mostly false. Anyways, if, let us see, age 1 is less than 18 and age 2 is less than 18, then we will return false. They cannot be married. Even though biologically and scientifically speaking, they should be married, but that is a tale for another time. It can be collapsed? No, we will not collapse it. Else if age 1 is greater than 18 and age 2 is less than 18, return false. For some reason, 2 16-year-olds having sex is normal, but once one of them is over 18, suddenly it is rape. How? God only knows. We can say, I will copy this, but switch the ages. So if age 2 is greater than 18 and age 1 is less than 18, this will also return false. You can copy this the Zahi way and say if age 1 is over 18 and age 2 is also over 18, then it is true. Well, there is the matter of age differences, because apparently if one spouse is much older than another spouse, for some reason that is predatory. Why? God only knows. Well, you know, first world thinkers, quite dumb. Oh man, I crack myself up. Let us see else. I guess we can return false here. There we go. Ah, okay, perfect. It simplified it for us in such a manner. Actually, to avoid confusing you, I will keep it as it is like that, so you can see everything. Now, we can use assertions or the JUnit framework to test this in case there were any errors committed in these comparisons. So what we need to do is move to the test folder in the Java folder, right-click, new, name the Java class. The practice or the convention you will see for a unit test will be the name of the class followed by test. That is what you will see. Marriage test, like so. Then you will add the methods you wish to test. So here it is marital age restriction. From what I have experienced, these names are reused in the unit test as well. You may find other conventions. It does not truly matter as long as you know how to test. Now I wish to create this method as a unit test. Firstly, I need to designate this upcoming method as a unit test. How do I designate it as such? Which Java class type do we use to annotate or designate particular behaviors? Annotations. So I will use @test, like so, and it will import it for me as you see here. There is an error because this needs to be added to a method. The method is absent, so let us add it. With JUnit 5, you need not add an access specifier, and considering how tests function, you need not add a return type. It can be void. We will see how in just a moment. Void marital age restriction, like so. And as you can see, here is the play button, which we will resort to run the test. As you can see here, it says run test. So executing tests is much different than executing the actual code. Remember, for code to be executed, you need the driver class, the one that contains the main method. For testing, it is much different. I wish to obtain the data or the code from this method localized within this class. How do I access a member of a class? by instantiating an object of that class. Also, as you can see here, this class is marked with a red button and a green button, and if I highlight it with the cursor, it says unit test class. So these markers indicate that we have obtained or downloaded the dependency correctly. Now I will begin by instantiating an object of the marriage class, and I will call it M for simplicity, is equal to new marriage. Then I will invoke the method m.marital age restriction, like so. I see that it invoked this instead. Now this is the correct method because this expects 2 arguments. And I will pass 17 and 16. Now, how do I confirm that the result of these 2 arguments being passed to this method will yield or beget the correct Boolean value? These 2 ages are below the threshold, which is 18, so it should return false. This false right here. How do I test this or assert this? How do I assert that when 17 and 16 are passed, it will return false? How do I confirm it? How do I assert it? Quite simply, the reason I am emphasizing the term assertion is because we will resort to static methods of the assertion class. That is the name of the class within the JUnit framework. It has methods that will assert or confirm the correctness or the validity of our code. So what we need to do is import the assertion class, assertions, like so, dot, and here we have the different assertion methods, or to be linguistically correct, assertive methods. We can statically import assertions class. That way we do not need to invoke the assertive methods using the class. So what we can do is, let us see if I can, there we go. So it imported this statically, which means that we do not need to call the methods or invoke the methods with the class name anymore. We can simply write the name of the assertion. This method returns a Boolean value. So we need to assert 4 Boolean values. Thus, we need to use a Boolean assertive method. Let us check assertions, the assertions class here, and look at the assertive methods available to us. As you can see, we have assert true. Oh yeah, we still did not cover suppliers, consumers, and functions yet. I should add that to the list. We have assert true and assert false. We will only have 2 variations because there are only true and false. Now let us look at the parameter. For assert true, we need to pass in a Boolean value. Then it will assert it for us. Once we run the test or execute the test, it will test and see if a false condition is actually false or if it is actually true. This detects for true. Assert true detects for true. Thus, it will yield an error if what is supposed to be true returns false instead. Conversely, assert false detects only falsehood. If a condition passed here is supposed to return false, but instead it returns true, then it will cause an issue or detect an error. This is how assertion functions. So I will keep this here for later in case we need to return to it again. So let us pass a Boolean value, which is this one right here. That is why I said you do not need a return type, because we will execute the test from here. So we do not need a main method or a driver class. So we can simply say assert true and pass this here. This, of course, will yield an error because this will not return true. All we need to do now to actually start the test is click this button here, or right-click and choose Run here. The reason I show this context menu for you is because this will play a role later on when we cover, well, coverage. So let us click here and see the result. As you can see, tests failed. How many tests did we carry? We only carried one test because we have only one unit test. How many of them failed? One, which is the only one we have. Let us analyze the error message here. This alerts you to the location of the issue, which is the assertion here, line 11. And this highlights what is to be expected and what was actually obtained. Since we used assert true, what is to be expected from this result is true, but instead we obtained false. Even though this test failed, it succeeded in validating or confirming or asserting the correctness of this code, that it is supposed to yield false. It is not supposed to yield true. This method, or rather this method with these arguments, should yield false instead of true. So even though the test failed, it confirmed or asserted the correctness of the code. If you hate seeing failures, we can switch from assert true to assert false. Now if we run this again, before we run this, I wish to show you this icon here. If you run a test and it fails, it adds a red circle with an exclamation mark within it. That is for IntelliJ, of course. I honestly know not what Eclipse or other IDEs label failed tests, but this simply shows you that your previous test failed. If we run this and it runs successfully, the error icon will disappear. This should run successfully because this returns true. And as you can see, tests passed 1 without any error codes, and it substituted the exclamation mark with a check mark. That means that this code here, which was supposed to yield false, actually yielded false. So the assert method asserted the correctness of this method. If I add here 20 and 18 without revealing the possible result, these two are allowed to marry by order of WHO, World Health Organization. And yes, I say order. It is not a suggestion. The governments enforce what the World Health Organization dictates. So it is an edict of the World Health Organization. Your countries, your governments are nothing more than puppets to the one world government. Whether you wish to believe me or not is irrelevant. Now, what should be the result of this method after we pass in these two? An 18-year-old can marry, and a person who is above 18 can marry. Let us test this and see if it will cause an issue, because this should return true. Let us run the test here. And it passed it correctly. It was true. It is false. This passed as false. If we change this to assert true, as you can see, it caused an issue. What is the issue? This is supposed to yield true, but instead it yielded false. What is the reason? You can pause the video and return to the code I wrote to identify the issue. Hopefully you can identify it. Pause the video, take a look at the code, and then listen to the answer. Okay, here is the answer now. Here I added greater than when I should have added greater than or equal to 18. That is where the error arose. So as you can see, I may have done this unintentionally. This was not done intentionally, of course. I actually forgot the equal sign. But I am glad I forgot it, because this illustrates the the significance and the necessity of unit tests. Now that I have corrected this, this should yield true now, because I added the equal sign. Now if we run this again, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, as you can see, the test passed successfully. You may have noticed the play button here as well. What is the purpose of this play button when the unit test is here? If you have multiple unit tests, let us say you are testing 3 methods instead of 1, if you wish to test all of them simultaneously, you click here instead of clicking on each one. You click this one and it will test all the unit tests within a class. It is quite convenient, but it is not part of the scope of this lecture, because we are testing assertions to learn what assertions are. There are other assertions, as you may have seen. We have assert null. This method is used to assert if the object being passed is null, or if it actually has space for it within memory. Here you also see that you can pass a message if the assertion fails. You have witnessed that the antonyms coexist. There is assert true and assert false. The same applies for null objects. There is assert null and assert not null. So this detects if an object is null. This detects if an object is not null. So if an object is null for this assertion, the test will fail. If an object is not null for this assertion, it will also fail. They must match this must match with the status of this to yield a successful test. You can use either or, obviously, but it will depend on how you wish to see the result. If you wish to detect an error through the failure of a test, by all means resort to that, then correct it as necessary. Or if you wish to view the result or detect an error by the lack of or the absence of any failures, that is also an approach. It would depend on how you wish to detect errors. In addition to this form of assertion, not insertion, we also have assert equals for different data types, not just short, of course. We have short, we have bytes. You will also see for int, long, and so on and so forth, multiple data types, obviously. But for this equals method, you will see two arguments or two parameters. The expected value that should be the result, and the actual value from your code. If the two match, then this will yield a positive result, as in it will yield true. If there is a mismatch, it will fail the test. And as before, with assert equal, we also have the opposite or the antonym. Assert, if I can find it in this mess. Ya Rabbi, for goodness sake, where is it? Seriously? They do not have it? Assert array equals, blah, 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 blah. Assert, no, seriously, where is it? Aha, assert not equals. So when these two do not match, this will pass. We have also other methods that you can read about if you are interested. Assert iterable equals, as in collections. If you pass in two collections and they match, this will yield true. If you pass in two arrays and they match, this will yield true, and so on and so forth. The identifiers of the methods are quite explicit, I should say. Especially with the arguments being passed, do not worry about the body of the method, really. What matters to us would be the name of the method and its arguments. Those are more than enough in terms of functionality indication. And that is it for assertions. What I would advise you to do is create different unit tests that test for different parameters or different arguments. We can actually create a few unit tests because I also would like to show you a method for exceptions which has been added in version 5, if I recall correctly. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Probably at the end. Ya Rabbi. Assert same, not same, as you can see here. And now I'm looking for throws. Throws. Was it this one or just throws? Ah, this one. Okay, let us cover this let us cover most of these assertions. So we have the Boolean one, assert true, assert false. Let us create another method. Public int what what can we call this? Marital age addition. And here we will pass int age1, int age2. Let us say we wish to add the ages of the spouses. If, without ifs, let us simply return age1 plus age2. Let us test this before we move on to another assertion. So I will copy this the Zahi way. Age addition. I will create an object here, and I will assert equals m dot marital age addition. Okay, let us see what is to be expected. 40. And what is the actual value? Sorry. This is 20 and 20 for this method. This method has two arguments: the actual and the expected. Here we wish to add 20 and 20, so the answer should be 40. The expected is 40. Once we run this test, and as you can see, since we have not run this before, there are no check marks or exclamation marks. So here's what will happen. This will be executed, and its result will be compared to this through this assertion. If they match, the test will pass successfully. If there is a mismatch, it will fail. Let us run this test. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you see, it has passed. So this code is running successfully. What if I accidentally subtract the ages? This will not equal this anymore. So this will fail. Let us test it. As you can see, it fails. Actual 0 because it is 20 minus 20. Well, what if I use the not equals method? Run. And it succeeded as expected because these do not equal each other, which should alert you that since this is addition, these two must be equal to this. So it alerts you to an error in the code. So we have seen assert equals and assert not equals. Let us test assert, what was it called? Assert null and not null. Then we will end this lecture with assert throws, how we can test for exception throwing. Okay, how will I design this? We need to test for nullable objects. Okay. Oh, I have an idea. We will create a method that accepts an object that must be instantiated previously, and if it is not instantiated, it will be null, obviously. So we can say marital age status. Here we can say string spouse1, string spouse2, and return string, and let us return spouse1. Now the reason, actually we do not need spouse2. The reason I added two spouses is because polygyny is legal for all religions except for the satanic religions. that allow for people having sex with everyone and everything, but when it comes to a marital contract, suddenly it is an issue for some reason. To fornicate with multiple partners is legal, but to marry multiple partners is suddenly demeaning. Anyways, first world thinkers, as I said, they are quite dumb. So we will return the string. The status will either be married, single, or widowed, also divorced. Now let us return here. It says there is a related problem, but I do not see the problem. That is interesting. H1, H2. Yeah, I do not see the problem. Sometimes IntelliJ has issues. Yeah, I do not see the error here. Okay. So I will copy this again, paste it here. And this will be marital age status. The name does not need to match the name of the unit test, obviously, but that is what I have experienced in a professional setting. Assert null, and let us pass in an object which will be m.marital status, and let us pass here null and see if this will pass. Expected not equal, but was... Wait, what? Oh, I think I ran... Did I run everything? I believe I did. I apologize. I need to run this and only this. As you can see, it passed, which means that the status of the spouse is indeed null. Well, what if I pass in an actual value? Let us see if this will fail or pass. So we can say married and run this. As you can see, expected null, but this has occupied space in memory, particularly the string pool, as we have seen previously. So what would happen if I say assert not null? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you can see, it passes successfully, and obviously if I write null here, this will fail, which is to be expected. Pun intended. Lastly, let us design a method that throws an exception. So it is a method that intentionally crashes the program through exceptions, as we have discussed previously, and see how we can assert such a method. How about we pass throw new exception. This is rape. Fornication only. There. And we will add it to the signature. So how can I assert this? This method now has an option that may throw an exception depending on the choices. Let us return here. I will remove this from compilation because now the assertion will differ. Again, we will add test void marital age restriction with exception, just to highlight that we are asserting for exceptions now. Now let us return here and see what arguments we need to pass. Here, firstly, we need to pass the expected type, which is class, as you can see here. Basically, we need to pass the exception that will be thrown should the problem arise. What is the exception here? It is the general exception. You can pass any exception you want, but honestly, this is the only sensical and logical exception for this situation, unless we create a custom exception. That is a different story. We can set it to illegal argument exception, since these are illegal arguments. Let us set it to illegal argument exception. So the exception type will be the first what is it called? The first argument. The second argument is an executable. What is the executable? I will show you in just a moment. Okay, let us instantiate the object. Then let us assert throws. Firstly, we need to pass the class type. It is illegal access exception. And remember, if you wish to use the name of a class, you use .class, comma. What is the executable? Let us see if we can click here. It is an interface. Remember, interfaces allow the passage of callback methods or callback functions into a method. Because passing callback functions is unavailable in Java as opposed to JavaScript, C and C++, possibly C#, I do not know. So instead they pass an interface, which means that we need to pass a method. How do we pass in a callback function into a higher order function? We can use the lambda expression, or we can instantiate an object of this interface and add the implementation in the constructor as we have seen previously. But it is best to use lambda because it is easier and quicker. And as you can see, this method has no return type. It does not have any parameters to pass. So the lambda expression will look as follows. Since it does not have any parameters, then it is a hyphen, not equal. I have been working with Angular for too long now. Because in JavaScript it is equal then greater than. So this is JavaScript, this is Java. Now we pass in the method that will throw this exception, which is what? This method right here. So it will be m.marital age restriction, and we can pass 16 and 16 because this will trigger or throw the exception. Now let us run this and see what happens. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you can see, the test passed. Why? Because the exception was thrown, and it was the correct exception passed here as well. So this indicates that passing this test indicates that an exception has been thrown. So the method functions properly and normally. What if I do not trigger this portion of the code here? Let us trigger this instead. So here I will add 18 and 18. Let us see what happens. As you can see, the test failed as expected because this was expected to be thrown, as you can see here, but nothing was thrown. So this failed as expected, which means that we implemented our code or wrote our code successfully. And with assert throw, there is assert does not throw. Let us test this now. Does not throw. This should pass now. does not, wait, did I, assert does not throw oh, okay, it just takes executable, never mind. So throws does not have an antonym. There we go. And that is it for assertions. We will continue with this sub-series in the future, bi'ithnillah and God willing, particularly the intermediate level of the course, where we cover, pun intended, coverage, and possibly delve deeper into unit testing. Possibly. I say possibly because we may not delve into that, since I believe I wish to focus solely on Java. But I thought we would cover unit testing because I discovered that even though you are a beginner in Java, knowing unit testing provides you with an advantage if you are applying for an internship or a position after graduation. May Allah create an easy process for you when you apply for employment, and Ameen. Lastly, just to show you what happens when I click this, this will run everything. So you can see number of tests of 3, so total 3, and all 3 all 3 failed. Let us see how they look in succession. In success, not succession. And run this again. And as you can see, all tests passed. And that is it for this video. I hope this lecture was helpful and beneficial to you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Be safe, take care, and peace be upon you all. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.